I actually came here to talk about today is the philosophies that I intend to implement with the Eddy County Sheriff's Office. How many of y'all have ever heard the term community policing? Anybody here heard of community policing? You know what? We've seen some transition through the years on different policing techniques, and I think most law enforcement agencies in the United States generally adopt two philosophies of law enforcement. What we commonly refer to as traditional law enforcement, and the others we call community policing. So, now I know this isn't a class, this is supposed to be more of a lecture, but I'm a teacher at heart, so I can't help but throw questions out. Can anybody give me what they would call, shoot from the hip, a definition of community policing? Does anybody have any idea what we might call community policing? Neighborhood watch, an excellent form of community policing, absolutely. Anyone else? Okay. Well, Neighborhood Watch is actually one of the programs that was inspired by community policing. And I think it's kind of funny that we call the other type of policing traditional policing. Has anybody ever heard of Sir Robert Peel? Okay, Sir Robert Peel, for those of you that don't know who he is, he has been credited with forming what we know the London Metropolitan Police Department back in 1829. He's also credited with this quote: "The police are the public, and the public are the police." So if you break down that statement, the public are the police, that's me. Okay, I'm a member of your community. I am the public, but I'm also the police. Okay, so that's the first half of that. The public, or the police are the public. So our law enforcement community is made up of people from the community. We have a vested interest in our community because we live there. The other side of that is the public are the police. That's the real zinger of that statement, if you will. The public are the police. Any law enforcement agency across the state, across the United States, I think if we were to find one that even fully manned with strong manpower, still cannot be everywhere at one time. We need the public's help to police our communities. I can remember when I was a detective here in Carlsbad, I was talking with, I don't remember if they were a victim or a witness, but they had seen an event or were aware of a criminal event, and I brought them in and was talking to them in an interview, and I was asking, well, what happened? Well, you're the police, find out. You're a detective, detect. You do the police work. What they don't understand is, I am doing the police work. I have to rely on the public to help me with police work. I go out and I do investigations, I talk to people. Yes, there's the whole forensic evidence side of the house that's not really talking to people. But talking to people is probably one of the biggest parts of our job as a law enforcement officer. So without the public, we can't do our job. How do we find out about most crimes? Occasionally we do roll upon a crime ourselves. More often, though, we're notified by the public of a crime. So the public are the police. We rely on the public to help us keep our communities safe. So Sir Robert Peel, back in the early 1800s, came up with this phrase. It's safe to say that community policing is actually not a new concept. Okay, traditional policing is actually a newer concept than community policing. If you think back to the old beat cop in New York City, okay, usually they were assigned to beat, and they would walk up and down the beat. They would get to know their community. They would get to know the business partners that they worked with on a daily basis. They got familiar with their community. And or even let's move out west. We are out west, right? The Old West Sheriffs, right? Do we call the Old West Sheriff just when we have a problem with somebody breaking the law? You know, more often than not, they were the peacekeepers, right? And peacekeeping is not always about enforcing the law. They would call upon these sheriffs to come and resolve all kinds of problems, not just matters of criminal law. And in order to do that, you had to be familiar with your community that you were serving. You had to become familiar with the people that you were serving. So what happened that changed things? The real game changer that kind of got us away from this community policing concept that has been around since the early 1800s. The one biggest thing that probably changed things for us was the car. There were a lot of other factors, but the car was probably the one technology that came along that made a major change in that community policing, because now officers were more mobile. We could get around faster. We were also more compartmentalized and more shut off from the community that we serve. We're in our car, we're in our own little bubble, and we drive around. We're not as approachable anymore as that beat officer that walks in front of our storefront every day. So because we became less approachable, we kind of lost that relationship with our community that we serve. There are a few other things that happened. Technology came along. We have now 911 systems. With the advent of the 911 systems and the radios, we're now finding out about crimes all the time, more frequently, more fast, and we're having to respond to it. We discover them, and we're responding to them, and sometimes we're getting a lot bigger workload simply because we're more available now than what we used to be. With the whole traditional policing concept, we also started doing what we call random patrols. The thought process behind it was good. A little mislaid, but it was a good thought process. We figured, well, if we're doing random patrols, then the crooks can't figure out when and where we are so that we're more apt to surprise them. Well, the problem with that is they're usually not paying that much attention to us, and two, we're spreading ourselves even thinner. It's actually better to do focus patrols. One of the other platforms that I'm saying on is utilizing technology to do things such as crime analysis. If we use crime analysis, then we know when and where to focus our efforts. Otherwise, we're randomly patrolling, hoping that we can find that needle in the haystack. And the last thing that happened to kind of transition us from community policing to the traditional policing that we often see today is a sense of professionalism. We thought, we're a professional organization. One, I guess there's kind of two issues that came with that. With the old beat cops, we did see some corruption going on. We thought, well, we need that professional distance so that we can eliminate that corruption. The other part of it was we thought, we're a professional organization. We need to be able to handle law enforcement ourselves. We don't need to rely on the public to solve crime. We should be able to handle it. And unfortunately, that thought process has filtered down even to our communities to where they call us up and they say, okay, you fix the problem. We can't fix it by ourselves. We have to have relationships with the community that we serve to solve our problems. So when did we see the return? We actually started to see a transition to the return to community policing in the 1970s. San Diego Police Department was actually one of the first police departments in the nation that did a series of empirical studies to find out the benefits of community policing. A fellow by the name of German Goldstein developed the problem-oriented policing concepts. That was in 1979. So even the return to community policing has been around for quite a while. It's been around longer than most of the patrol officers that you see driving the streets. But for some reason, we're a little slow to change sometimes. We didn't actually see some national acceptance of community policing or the return to community policing until the 1990s. But take that into account, we're over a decade away from that now. So here we are in 2012, wondering, why aren't we out there doing community policing? I started off asking if we could come up with a definition of community policing or an example of community policing. If you look at what the U.S. Department of Justice, the way they define community policing, their definition is, community policing is a philosophy that promotes organizational strategies which support the systematic use of partnerships and problem-solving techniques to proactively address the immediate conditions that give rise to public safety issues such as crime, social disorder, and fear of crime. Kind of a long definition, but I think it's a really good one. And it breaks it down very well for us. So basically, when you look at that definition, the first part of it is we need to form partnerships. So what kind of partners are out there? Who do we have available to us? There's 5 different categories that the U.S. Department of Justice has come up with as far as where we can find our partners. And I suspect as I go through this list of 5 categories, everyone in this room falls into one of those 5 categories. We have other government agencies. And even within other government agencies, we have other law enforcement agencies, which I can tell you we've had some really good success up in Artesia with. When I first moved to Artesia, we were in a bubble of having a lot of drive-by shootings. And we were trying to address the issue. And I've heard some people say, well, the drive-by shootings were thugs on thugs, if you will, if you'll pardon the phrase. You know, it was our little gang members were shooting at other gang member houses. And so somebody said, well, let them kill themselves. They'll resolve their own problem. There's 2 problems with that. One of them, you can figure out which pocket I put it in. I don't think there's anything in here that says that I have to prioritize one citizen over the other. I took an oath to promote safety within my community, and it didn't say that, well, I can pick and choose who I need to protect. I'm supposed to protect all the citizens of my community. The other problem with it is, guess what? They're not the best shot. They didn't go to any marksman school. Then we had a shooting in Artesia where somebody was standing on a corner, or at the end of the block, shooting at a house in the middle of the block. Yes, it was. 9mm, of course. So when you got a distance shot with a handgun, with somebody who's never had any formal firearms training, you know what happened? They shot the neighbor's house. Is that a problem? Absolutely, that's a problem. We had another shooting. Like I said, it was a bubble. We were having a bunch of problems with it. We had another shooting where, they were going to go shoot up Spanky's house. And here's where Spanky lives, so let's go shoot it up. But guess what? Their intelligence and recon wasn't real good. They didn't know that Spanky moved out 2 months ago. They had some new people that had moved into the house 3 weeks before it got shot up. There again, is that a problem? Absolutely. So we need to do something about that. We've had a lot of success, as I said, partnering with other law enforcement agencies in Artesia. One of the things we did is we started working these drive-by shootings. And bless these people for doing their job. They help us out. But they're limited by what state law says. Shooting at an occupied dwelling, 4th degree felony, right? 4th degree felony, maximum sentence? 18 months. Now, let's stop for just a minute. Most of the people that are doing our shootings, they have a history of criminal offenses. So there's a really good chance that we can also charge them with felon in possession of a firearm. Also?
18 months.
18 months. So, if by chance we can get them to stack the sentences, make them run consecutively rather than concurrently, or make them run back to back, that's a maximum sentence of 3 years. Maximum. I can tell you right now, one of our tools that we use when we're working with these criminals to help work out the cases, we do these things called plea bargains. And a lot of times we'll work out a deal where we maybe run them consecutive or concurrently instead of consecutively and only get 18 months. Okay? We don't always get approved for the maximum sentence. So a lot of times our sentences are less than that 3 years that we're hoping for. So what do we do in Artesia? I mean, even if it was 3 years, you've got the maximum sentence, they're gone for 3 years. What happens in 3 years? They come back. Where are all their buddies? They're still in town causing the same problems they were causing when they left. So it's easy to hook back up with their old friends and get back into the same trouble again. Because, okay, well, they left and their buddy was 18, now he's 21, he can buy the beer. But their crowd is still there. We call them the ATF. Under federal law, possession of a firearm by prohibited persons includes felon in possession, 10-year hitch. 10-year hitch have a little bit more impact than 3 years. Now where are all their friends? Well, by that time, all their friends are in their late 20s, early 30s. Maybe we're seeing some of them gone to prison. So it has a much bigger impact than the 3 years that we can see locally by partnering with other law enforcement agencies.